I think as Australian citizens, it's high time we started talking about replacing the Australian Constitution. Let me tell you why. My name is Brett Manning. I'm trustee of the New Aussie Constitution Trust. The New Aussie Constitution is a draft replacement for the current Australian Constitution. If you've been watching the news, you may have seen that in the US there's a constitutional challenge as to whether Donald Trump can run for office again, depending on whether he's guilty or not of being subversive. Now, I'm not particularly interested in US politics, but what it does show is the importance of a constitution and what that constitution says. And that is because the constitution is a set of rules that cannot be broken, no matter how much somebody might want a different outcome. So what is a constitution? And where does it fit in the big scheme of things? A constitution is really a contract. It's a contract between the people, between you and I, as citizens of Australia, that sets down what our rights and what our responsibilities are. And it is also a contract with those who would govern over us. So in Australia, we have a democracy. We vote a government into place. How that government operates is governed by the Constitution itself. So the Constitution determines the contract between you and I, the government we've elected to look after us, and the monarch to which we have given ultimate power. Now, some of you might be saying, oh, but the Parliament determines the laws in Australia, not the monarch. Well, at the end of the day, nothing becomes law in Australia without royal assent. That is, the Governor-General has to sign off every law created in Australia and every law repealed. And the Governor-General does that at the behest of the King, which means ultimately the King decides whether the laws that have been voted on by our democratically elected Parliament become Australian law. And this gives us a problem, because if the King ever disagrees with the elected government of Australia, the King has the upper hand. The King can choose not to give assent to legislation passed by our Parliament. The King can choose to make a royal decree and make law for Australia at his behest. So if there was a disagreement between the democratically elected Australian government and the King would come out on top. So, for instance, King Charles is very strong on the environment. What if King Charles decided today that he wanted all coal mines in Australia closed down in 90 days? He could make that proclamation and it would be law. And you might say, well, we'd never stand for that. We'll go to the High Court. The only problem is the High Court will look at the Constitution and will rule in favour of the King. Now, you also might reasonably say that we've had 120 years where the King, or previously the Queen, hasn't interfered in Australian politics and Australian decision making. We've been left to get on with our own decisions. But the risk is still there, because the ultimate power rests with the King. And there may come a day when we will realise that we are not a democracy and that we don't have the freedom that we think we have. Australia is a strong, independent nation, and that needs to be reflected by the people having the final say in how Australia is run. And that means that the head of state that grants our laws that have been developed by our elected parliament needs to be an Australian and needs to have been elected by the people. In any other circumstance, we are entirely beholden to a single individual who lives in another country, but who has the ultimate legal power in Australia. That person has not been elected by the Australian people. That person can change at any time. Quite as an aside, I think there are a huge range of things that we need to fix in our Constitution, not just this issue. But this issue is at the centre of our legal rights. We have a contract with each other. We have a contract with our elected government and our officials. And we have a contract with a monarch that lives in another country. And out of all those, we've put the monarch at the top with total legal power. The only way to fix this is to replace or amend the existing constitution. But ultimately, we need to gain our independence that reflects what we believe we currently have, which is the right of self-determination. The new Aussie Constitution is a full replacement draft that is available for you to review on the New Aussie Constitution Trust website, www.newaussieconstitution.com.au. Thanks for your time.